Good morning. Welcome to Walking Boxing. It is Monday, May the 12th, 2025. And good weekend of boxing. Hell of a lot better than the weekend before, wasn't it? Wasn't it great to see some fights, even though there was some controversy? How good was it to see some punches being thrown, some fighters really turning up to have a crack? It was, a lot better and a lot less expense for the fighters than what it was last week. And we had all those massive fights overseas in New York, Saudi Arabia, and Las Vegas, and all the money involved, apart from the Inoue fight, of course. There's nothing wrong with that one. That was a ripper. But then over the weekend, we had the Emmanuel Navarrete and Charlie Suarez fight. Won't say it was fight of the year candidate, but it was a really, really good fight, and obviously ended in controversy. I'll get to that in a sec. And then we had the Anthony Kisashi and Lee Wood fight. Again, not fight of the year, but still just an entertaining scrap. And don't you just love the fights in England, how they get into it? They're just so invested in the sport over there, in the boxes. Geez. Again, I'll say it, just a far cry from the deserts of Saudi Arabia and the half-empty halls and fighters who turn up and couldn't give a toss. Anyway, it's a new week. I won't keep dwelling on that. But firstly, on this day, I'll get into those fights in a second, by the way, but on this day, May the 12th, just a couple of things. What was it, 2001, Felix Trinidad beat William Joppy for the WBA welterweight title. And also, big one for us just last year, it was George Kambosos falling in 11 rounds to the great Vasily Lomachenko in Perth. I was at that fight. It was a ripper day of fights, actually, full of controversy as well. Geez, not so much the main event, because that was pretty, well, I won't say it was one-sided, because George actually, I thought, gave a good account of himself, but Vasily Lomachenko on the day just sort of showed, even at, what was he, 36 years of age, that he still had it, and just sort of again showed that there are levels in the sport. And George, as good as he did, was just not on the level of Loma, and it was just a masterclass by Vasily Lomachenko, who stopped George with a body shot, surprisingly, which is something you don't really see. Well, unless there's a Mexican involved, they tend to get a lot of fighters out of there with body shots, don't they? But especially Vasily Lomachenko, you haven't sort of seen him stop someone over the years with a body shot, but he did over George, and that was on this day. You remember on that card as well, the controversy was the undercard, and it started with the girls, Shanika Johnson and Nina Hughes. Look, I thought it was a really close fight on the day, so did the judges, obviously. They gave it to Nina Hughes, I think, on a split decision, and I remember thinking, oh, geez, okay, I knew it was close. Maybe just in favour of Nina Hughes, but I thought, well, it is in Australia, so of course it's got to go to the hometown fighter, and I was surprised that they gave it to Hughes, but not as surprised as Lieutenant Dan Hennessy, who got it wrong. He called the fighters back to the ring without actually, and this is the weird thing about it, he didn't actually say anything. The decision was announced. Nina Hughes, I think, retained her title. Yeah, it was for her title. And the crowd cheered, and she hugged her team, and Shanika Johnson took a moment to sort of gather herself, and then Lieutenant Dan walked back to the centre of the ring and said, like nothing had even happened. I almost thought we'd gone back in time about a minute. And he just read the scores out again, and this time announced Shanika Johnson as the champion. Now, I think in hindsight, Lieutenant Dan would have done it a hell of a lot different, because I think everyone was scratching their heads thinking, did he just do what I think he did? And everyone, of course, there's controversy, of course, because of they thought the judges had overturned it. It wasn't the case. He just read it out wrong, of course. But I just thought what he should have done was go to like a lot of other people in the same position over the years have done, who've made the wrong announcements. There's been a lot of them, from game shows to beauty contestants and all the rest of it, and boxing, of course. I've been on the wrong end of one of those myself, actually. But anyway, just to go to the centre of the ring and say, ladies and gentlemen, there's been an error with the scorecards. These are the correct scorecards, and read them out and announce the winner. But the fact that he didn't even mention anything about stuffing it up and just announced it like nothing had happened. I think that's where the confusion was and people scratching their heads, especially Nina Hughes, who couldn't believe it that she'd just been announced as the winner and the retainer title, and the euphoria of that, and vice versa for Shanika Johnson, and then within the space of a minute, it's totally flipped. So that was the first controversy, and then was Andrew Maloney's fight with Pedro Guevara for the WBC interim 115-pound title. And look, I thought, again, I know probably showing my bias here, I thought Andrew Maloney won the fight clearly. I know up in the stands, it's sort of hard because when you're watching it live, you just tend to, you don't see all of it. You don't see a lot of the inside work. You don't see just some of the stuff that happens. And I just remember thinking on the night that Andrew just had won it clearly. I just had no reservations. And then it was a split decision, I think, to Pedro Guevara. And of course, Andrew spat the chewy in the ring after the fight, said he'd never fight again and was done with this, and threw the hands in the air. But I think we all sort of knew that wasn't going to be the case. It was just an outburst of a pretty frustrated fighter. You know, Andrew had sort of had a couple of these sort of things during his career, especially the Joshua Franco fight when he punched Franco with a glove. There was no head clashes or anything else involved, and even with video replay, they couldn't find a headbutt, but they still called it an accidental headbutt anyway with the eye, and that was a 2-round or 3-round, was it? To second round, it might have been technical knockout. Technical draw, and Franco retained his title. And I thought that was just another one that got away from Andy, but that was a very frustrating day for him. And did come back at the end of last year, and now he's got a world title eliminator coming up. So it's not all doom and gloom for Andy or Jason as well, 34 years of age. So let's hope they get another crack this year. But it was an entertaining card. We had 15,000 people or something there. It was a good day of boxing. I don't mind the daytime fights, actually. It's not a bad way to go about it. And I just remember, though, actually the last fight, thought we'd quickly hang around. They had the swing bout of Lucas Brown. Who did he fight? The Kiwi, and got blown out in a round. That was a bit sad. I went to the bathroom actually and come back and it was all over. So as I said to Uncle Ronnie, who I was with, all right, I'll be back in a sec. They touched gloves. I said, all right, I've got to quickly go because everyone was filing out after that because the main event was over. But we'd hang around for that. So I quickly went to the bathroom. There's a little bit of a line, come back and they were announcing the other guy as the winner. But anyway, good day of boxing, and yeah, it's amazing that George now is about to fight for another world title 12 months down the track. All right, over the weekend, the big fights, as I said, Anthony Koshashi beat Lee Wood. Good fight, 9th round stoppage. I thought he fought really well. He's going to look at maybe Sharky Foster next for the WBC 130-pound title. I think he'll give Sharky Foster a fight, but I think Foster wins that one. But the controversial fight was Navarrete and Suarez, the Filipino up against the Mexican. And look, it was probably a routine type of fight up until the stoppage. And with the result, if you don't know, I'm sure you do, but Navarrete retained his WBO belt with a split decision. Oh, it was a split decision or a unanimous decision, whatever it was a decision win over Suarez. And after the cut to the eye, accidental headbutt apparently. So, but yeah, I thought Navarrete fought the way he normally does. Just very, very awkward, all over the place. Arms and legs sort of going everywhere. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but it's always been effective for Navarrete. And he's so awkward, and the size difference was really noticeable. Navarrete, just a massive 130-pounder. I don't know how he makes the weight. I know he did struggle with this fight, but I've got no idea how he makes 130. But he does, and then obviously rehydrates up. I don't think he'd probably go down well as an IBF champion because with the rehydration clause, it mightn't be as easy for him. But I thought Suarez fought really well. Also, I think he was sort of picking his punches a lot more. Being a little bit shorter, he was sort of coming in underneath Navarrete's punches and countering him really well. And both guys landed some really good shots. I thought it was just a really good scrap. We didn't get it live here, by the way. I had to watch it on YouTube last night, which is ridiculous again. But anyway, it is football season, so pretty hard to get a gig on the Aussie TVs when there's football on with any other sport. But I thought actually, even though both guys had their moments, I thought that Suarez was probably having slightly the better of the exchanges and maybe just sort of getting a little bit more confidence as the fight went on. Look, I thought it was really close though. Navarrete, again, where was it? San Diego or somewhere. But look, it was a tough, close, even fight. But again, as I said, I thought Suarez was maybe just starting to get the better of Navarrete. But maybe the weight cut was sort of taking its effect. But then in the seventh round, whatever it was, and the head clash, quote unquote, and the doctor let it go with blood gushing out everywhere. And then at the start of the eighth round, it was called off, and it was to the scorecards, and Navarrete got the win. Now, I've watched the replay of this numerous times, and Suarez, and I thought quite rightly so, claimed that the punch was, I think it was a left sort of uppercut / sort of hook that nailed Navarrete right on that eye. It was a beautiful shot, beautiful count. I think it might have been from a southpaw stance actually, and just nailed Navarrete perfectly on that eye. And I thought, yeah, that's the punch right there. But then I looked a little sort of closer. There was just after that, the two fighters did just sort of nick heads. It wasn't a full-on clash, but as they just went past each other, you could just see Suarez's head just nick Navarrete's head. But it was really hard to see exactly which one caused the cut. And obviously the guys that went, because video replay are in California, they've got access to it, and they went back and forth and they couldn't see it. So initially I thought, well, that's just blatantly easy to see. Surely they can get this right, although I didn't have much faith in them after what happened to Andy Maloney. But then, as I said, looking at it a couple of times back and really stopping it and pausing it and everything else, it was really hard to see exactly. So I sort of understand that they had to go to the scorecards. And it was probably a good thing with this video replay, because if it hadn't been the video replay, I'm sure they just would have said, accidental head clash, without even sort of thinking about it. The referee did sort of call it that way, and it wouldn't have been even an issue. But I like the fact they could at least go to the footage, even though they couldn't really find the exact moment it happened. I think they had to go with, maybe, well, you couldn't really see it definitive, so I can understand why they just say, hey, look, we've just got to go to the scorecards on this one. We can't really see, because if it had been a punch, Suarez would have won the fight. But then after the fight, and it was interesting though that Navarrete said it was a head clash and Suarez said it was a punch. Of course, they were going to say that, but afterwards, it looks like the California Boxing Commission with the WBC look like they're going to call it a no contest. I think there's going to be protests and all this sort of stuff go on. So I don't know. I'm not that stressed about it, calling it a technical decision. Just give Suarez a rematch. That's all they've got to do. WBC just got to push the rematch and away we go, and problem solved. So, but boxing, it just always just tends to literally give itself a black eye sometimes, doesn't it? But either way, it was good to see both fighters, throwing 60, 70, 80 punches around than what we got last week with 150 punches thrown by Canelo over 12 rounds in total. It was ridiculous. Good weekend of boxing. Now, I saw over the weekend as well that Billy Joe Saunders is also looking to make a comeback, which I think is great. The problem is, of course, is that Billy Joe Saunders resembles a barrel at the moment. There's talk that he is going to be the third fight for Chris Eubank Jr. Now, you would think he's got a lot of work to do before he gets down to 168. I think he's going to have a fight, at least one fight at 175 and then come down. But he did say that at his peak, he got up to 18 stone. Now, I had to look this up because I'm not quite sure how many pound are in a stone. But I think kilo-wise, I think 10 stone is 60 kilos. So I think I worked out it was 108 kilos is what he got up to, which is about, what's that, about 235, 237, something like that in pounds. And that's a hell of a lot bigger than super middleweight, which I think is 76. So what's that, 24, 32 kilos he's put on since his fight with Canelo. That is a hell of a lot of weight. Now, I think that was at his peak and he's come down a little bit. But so Chris Eubank Jr. has said he wants Conor Benn at the end of this year in the rematch. Then he'll fight Canelo at Wembley Stadium in London in May. and then he wants Billy Joe Saunders towards the end of 2026, if he can get his act together. You remember that Billy Joe Saunders actually beat Chris Eubank Jr. back in 2014. So, yeah, not a bad strategy for Chris Eubank. He reckons that'll see him out. Probably retire with, probably 15 to 20 million bucks in his account. Actually, probably more than that. Probably more like about 25, you would think, if he fights Ben and Canelo as well as Eubank. Probably an extra $25 million for him over 3 fights, and he can retire very, very well set up. I tell you what, speaking of weight, I read a really good article over the weekend by Russ Amber. Now, Russ Amber is sort of a trainer, cut man, sort of, I think he's in with, I think he's with Usyk and Loma and those types of guys. I've seen him on D-Styles' channel a few times. I think he also is the head of Rival Boxing as well. And he wrote an article about the weight situation or divisions in boxing at the moment. And I thought it was really well said about what is this fascination with fighters sort of going up and down in weight at the moment. He reckons that's a reason why maybe Canelo was hindered against William School. I just think he was unmotivated and fighting at 7 o'clock in the morning, which wouldn't have helped in a foreign country in front of a half-empty stadium. So that wouldn't have helped Canelo. But he did make a good point that he went up to 175 twice and has come back. And he said, as you get older, that really does take an effect. And maybe he's right. But he also probably pushed back on, say, Terence Crawford to say, well, coming up from 147, had that one fight at 154. How's he going to react at 168 if Canelo turns up and actually really throws some punches? And Canelo can punch when he sets his feet. If he can catch Crawford, what damage he could sort of do. I mean, it was just raising different things. And he made a good point about this fascination. I mean, I think Manny Pacquiao was probably the one that sort of started all this. I know back in the day there was Henry Armstrong and a few of the others that went up in weight a fair bit as well, Roberto Duran and a few of the others. But I think in modern times he was sort of saying that it was about Manny Pacquiao and now this fascination with Inoue going up, and Canelo's been through 3-4 divisions, and Crawford the same, 5 divisions, and all this sort of stuff. And he did say that, look, hey, because I think he sort of was referring to Naoya Inoue, everyone pushing Naoya Inoue to go to 126 and then maybe even up to 130 and even higher to fight Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson and these types of guys. And he did say, look, why is this being urged on Naoya Inoue? Why can't he just prove his greatness at his current weight and his most comfortable weight? Why does moving up in weight have a bearing on his potential legacy, which I agree with? And Naoya Inoue himself has actually said 130 is probably the limit for him, which I still think's a little bit high, considering he's probably still a 118 pounder who's just fighting at 122 for these titles, and then we'll probably go to 126 and we'll see after that. But he did say that, well, Marvin Hagler fought at middleweight his whole career and is revered as one of the greatest fighters ever. Gennady Golovkin fought at middleweight his entire career and is regarded as one of the best ever. And he said that Roy Jones, he went from middleweight to super middleweight to light heavyweight to heavyweight, and when he came back was just never the same either. So yeah, it sort of made a good point, I thought, from Russ Amber. And these fighters that are just that they kill themselves to make weight, and that's why I think he said the IBF rehydration clause is probably a good thing, because it just forces fighters just to make that call about, why am I just weight cutting so much and really putting my health in danger and my performance in danger? And I know on the opposite side of the coin there'll be others that say, well, if they can make the weight, they can make the weight, big deal, just let them go. But I can assure you that it doesn't do great things for the body when you've got to cut up to 10 kilos, which is about 20 pounds to make weight, and then put on at least half of that back before the fight starts. So anyway, I thought it was just a good article. I think it was on, what was it? It might have been Boxing Scene or one of those. If you haven't read it, go and check it out, because it just makes some good points. And as I said, Naoya was probably, and Terence Crawford were probably the two sort of examples. And about what he thought about why do they have to keep going up. And with Canelo, well, we're all talking about his decline. Maybe that had something to do with it. But I don't know. I think there's lots of factors. I think the fact that Canelo's also had nearly 70 fights and he's, 34 or 35 years old, would have something to do with it as well. But anyway, food for thought. But anyway, guys, excuse the pun there, by the way. All right, guys, I hope you have a great Monday and a great start to the week, and we'll catch you tomorrow.